I was working as a morgue assistant in a hospital, and the morgue of the hospital was infamous among the workers to be haunted. But from the past 6 months that I've been working there, I never saw any kind of ghost or any sort of paranormal activity around me until one day. In the hospital, shifts usually got rotated, and that day, I was on night duty. You might think that the hospital gets less busy during the nighttime than the day, which may be true for most hospitals, but not this one. The hospital I worked in was usually busy during the day too. Yes, the daytime was busy because of the rush hour. The main reason for this hospital to stay busy during the nighttime as well was because it was the nearest hospital to many such places where accidents took place. But that night was unusually quiet and fewer dead bodies were brought in. I had just completed the autopsy of the man that was brought in, and I put his body into the morgue's cabin when I was informed that another dead body was brought in. So I went ahead to check the body, and it was badly disfigured. I could tell that he had died more than 10 hours ago. On top of that, the body was unidentified as well. It was supposed that the person was murdered, and the autopsy was required to find out his identity. I was already tired from performing autopsies one by one, so I decided to take a short break before cutting open another corpse. I went to the hospital canteen to get some coffee where I saw Dr. Fresco. I got mesmerized by him for a few minutes. Yes, you guessed correctly. I had a teeny weeny crush on him, but he had already had a girlfriend. She was one of the most brilliant doctors working here, and I was nothing compared to her. Well, I don't dream big either. After having my coffee, I walked back to perform at the morgue because it was better if I start working now. And you never know, things might start getting busy again. As I was walking towards the morgue, I felt an unpleasant smell in my way, which was only getting stronger as I got closer. Another thing that I noticed was that it was unusually quiet and there was no one around except for me, which was strange because there was always someone present here, a mortician or someone from the housekeeping. I took out the mask from my pocket and wore it even though it could not control the rotten smell that was coming. There was no way that it was coming from any of the corpses because all of them were put in the refrigerator and none of them were anywhere near decomposing. So I walked inside the morgue and started checking each cabin to where the smell was coming from. After going through each one of them, I was relieved to see that they were all fine. Now, there was just one last body to check, which came in not too long ago. The body of the unidentified man, which I was yet to perform the autopsy on. But when I opened his cabin, I was shocked to see that it wasn't there. I looked around to see if someone took it out for an investigation purpose, but no matter how hard I looked, it just wasn't there. That was when I heard the sound of the door opening and turned back to look at it, but no one was there. The door was moving back and forth a bit as if someone had just left. So I ran after that only to see someone walking away. It was more like he was dragging his body away. Called out for him, but all of a sudden he disappeared. I could feel the rotten smell also disappearing along with it. I was too petrified to move when I felt someone's hand over my shoulder and I jumped away all scared. But I felt relieved to see that it was Mr. Finn, the mortician. "Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" he said with a light chuckle while walking inside the morgue. "I think I just did, Mr. Finn," I said with an anxious voice. "Oh, really?" I could feel the lightness in his voice and understood that he wasn't taking me serious. "I'm telling you the truth. You know that an unidentified man's body was just brought in, right?" I asked him. I was dead on telling him what just happened, and there was no other way to explain the missing body as well. "Yeah, I do know about that," he said while focusing his complete attention on me. "Well, I put his body in the cabin in the presence of the other mortician whose shift is right before you, and was going to perform the autopsy right after a short break. But then I got back and he wasn't there. I saw his dead body walking down this hall before he got here. I told him all this in one breath, and he raised his eyebrow on me. I still felt that he did not believe me. So, if what you're saying is true, then the man's body wouldn't be here, right?" After saying that, he walked ahead and opened the cabin. I was surprised to see the body was there, as if it had been there the whole time. But I looked at him with a dumbfounded expression on my face and couldn't say anything else. Listen to me very carefully, Penelope. This morgue's atmosphere can put a toll on one's mind, so never let this place fool you, because what you see is not always true. He said this with a very serious and calm tone. After that, the two of us started performing the autopsy on the man's body, and as we were done, he looked at me once again with a serious look and said, "I always thought of you as a daughter I never got the chance to have, and you're still young and can achieve many things in your life, so stay strong and never stop believing in yourself." He put his hand on my head, and after saying that, he smiled a very soft and beautiful smile just before leaving. As he left, I finished cleaning up and put the body back in the refrigerator. For some reason, the horror scene from before wasn't that terrifying anymore, just after talking with Mr. Finn. Instead, I was feeling calm and confident. I decided that even if I were to get face-to-face experience with any ghost, I will try to stay strong and not phase out. After about an hour or so, I was informed about the last body that was brought in last night, and it was that of an old man who had died in his sleep. The moment I heard of it, I rushed towards the body to see if it was true or not, but when I saw him, tears started to stream from my eyes. It was him. It was the body of Mr. Finn.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
It was the happiest day of my life. After years of dedication and hard work, I was finally promoted to the position of manager in my company. And that was not all. I proposed to the girl I'd been dating for the past 5 years, and she said yes to me. What more could a guy ask to be happy? I could not contain the amount of happiness I was feeling and kept smiling foolishly. Thinking about all the good things that kept happening one by one, I was driving back to my apartment while humming a song. I do not know if I did not see the light or something, but if that truck driver took the wrong turn and hit my car, and soon enough, I was in a car accident. I could hear the voice of my bones breaking, the sharp, uncontrollable pain when the pieces of glass pierced through my skin, and the throbbing pain that I was feeling in every inch of my body. I saw a gush of blood coming out of my head and some other parts of my body with a stinging sensation. Before passing out, I could feel the agony I was in at the moment of the accident. I don't remember much after that. I woke up vaguely in the hospital, and I guess it was the surgery room. Again, I woke up in the surgery room. I don't know if anyone was around or not because I couldn't see or hear anything. But I was aware of the fact that I was awake. After a few moments, I heard the voice of my fiancée, Agatha, who was talking to someone, and I could tell from her hiccups that she was crying. I guess my being in this state may have broken her heart. After that, I was asleep again. Again, I woke up when I heard the voices of my mother, Agatha, and the male that I guess must be the doctor. He was telling them that there was nothing they could do and that I was dead. I could not believe him. I was alive, and he was telling my family that I was dead. Thinking I should confront him, but no matter how much I tried, my voice just wouldn't come out. I couldn't even open my eyes or make any sort of movement from my body to let them know that I was alive. Am I dead? Is this what happens when someone dies? That was what I started to think. I guess I was only regaining consciousness for a brief period because, again, I fell asleep after that. The next time I woke up, I could feel that I was getting carried somewhere through the stretcher, and then I lost consciousness again. This time when I woke up, I could feel a chill going through my entire body, so I tried opening my eyes, and somehow I managed that this time, I was able to see. I was in this little cramped box which was feeling colder than a refrigerator, and that was when it hit me. I was in a morgue's refrigerator. I couldn't believe it. Not only did they presume me dead after checking thoroughly, they even put my body in a morgue. My body was covered with these white sheets which were not enough to keep me protected from the temperature of this place. I could feel the numbness going through my body little by little, and the pain surging along with it. I tried moving my hand, but I could only move my fingers. My breathing was getting heavier by the second, and the more I felt the awareness of the place, the more suffocated I was feeling. That was when all of a sudden the coldness started to get a toll on my mind, and I started to feel my vision getting blurry again. I had already gotten a death-like experience, and I did not want to die for a second time as well. So I tried my best to stay conscious even though my entire body had been frozen by this time. But I failed to keep myself awake and lost consciousness once more. I don't know if it was my luck or God just did not want me to die just yet. I woke up right when I felt the freezing of the place getting a bit slower. Either they had closed the refrigerator willingly or there had been a power cut. But whatever it was in my favor. I don't know if I should feel lucky or terrified of the fact that I was not yet in a state, but I could only hear whatever was happening in my surroundings. The suffocation, the fear, the awareness of the morgue, and the smell that was coming from the cabin I was in were just nauseating. I cannot describe to you in a way that you would understand the feeling that I was getting at that moment. I was surrounded by dead bodies, but I was still alive. All I could do was wish that someone opens the door of this and takes me out of this place. To break it to you how I was spending my time there was that I kept losing and gaining consciousness. I don't know how many times I thought that I was already dead and may have come back as a ghost, but I still kept hoping that it'd not be the case. The last time I gained consciousness, I was getting pulled out of there, which made me feel relief. I opened my eyes and continued to move the only part of my body that I could move, my fingers. The moment the guy saw my open eyes and moving fingers, he started screaming at the top of his lungs and ran out of the morgue. After a while, a few other people came rushing inside and took me to another room to check if I was alive. They put me on life support and called my family. I saw my mother and Agatha caressing my face and crying like children from the happiness that I was alive. And after 2 months or so, I was able to speak again and move other parts of my body as well. I'm still in the hospital getting treatment and recovering from my injuries, but one thing that has added to my health is the trauma of me being in the morgue. Each time I fall asleep or close my eyes, I feel like I'm still in there, and whenever I would open my eyes, I would find myself stuck there. But I'm relieved every time I open my eyes and I'm alive, and I'm also able to move my body. The one thing that I'm sure about is the day I got discharged from the hospital. I'm never going to step a single foot in another hospital ever again.
Did you get a job yet? No, Mom, not yet, I replied. What happened to the last interview? Did they call you? It was Thursday evening, and I was having some snacks with my mom, and we were having a nice conversation when she started asking these questions. I didn't get it. She gave me a concerned look at my answer, while I just kept my head down, focused on the bowl I had in front of me. I knew what her expressions were without even looking at her. It was as if she is trying to tell me that get over what happened in the past and continue to focus on what was ahead of us. Even though I had told her everything, I know she doesn't believe me and thinks of my story as a delusion created by my own mind. But only I know what I experienced, and getting over it is not as easy as people say. There is only me and my mom in our family. Father cheated on my mom when she was pregnant with me. She raised me on her own, but as I was growing older, she started to look tired all the time. So I asked her to stop working, and I myself started to do some part-time jobs. Our family is not very well off, so I had to work overtime most of the time. It was about 15 to 20 days ago when I couldn't find any job. I got an opportunity to work as a cemetery keeper. There were 2 shifts. First was between 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., and second was between 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. For some reason, the pay for the evening shift was way higher than the day one, but still people were rejecting the offer. As I was already in urgent need of money, I took the evening shift as an opportunity to earn some extra cash, but I had no idea back then what was the real reason behind people not accepting this job, even after pay being this high. It was the first day of my job. I tried to take as much sleep as I could for the day so that I would be able to focus on my job during night, but I woke up around 4 p.m. and couldn't sleep after that. The cemetery wasn't that far, so I head out for the job around 6:30 p.m. I reached there on time. It looked like a pretty old cemetery, and no one was visiting at that hour. There was a cabin at the end of cemetery just around the corner. I guess that must be for the cemetery keepers. I walked towards it, and I was walking, I saw an old man. must be in his late 50s, from the small window in the cabin. He was sitting in the wooden chair placed inside the cabin. The chair must be for keepers to sit and look and have a watch in the cemetery from that small window. I figured he must be another keeper besides me. Why did they hire another one when they already had a keeper? It's not like people visited this hour, and there was absolutely no possibility of a robbery at this place. That's what I was thinking at the moment. I walked inside, looked at him, and introduced myself. "Hi, my name is Luca. I'm the new keeper." He stared at me, but no response. It felt awkward to me, so again tried to make the environment a bit of lighter and asked him if he was also a keeper, but he didn't respond. He stood up and walked out. I shrugged my shoulders, sat in the chair, and started to look outside. Several hours passed. I opened my phone to check time, and it was 12:50 a.m. I was feeling bored because there was absolutely nothing to do, and I was also getting a bit sleepy. I tried my best to stay awake, but it failed, and I fell asleep. I saw myself standing in the middle of the cemetery, and I guessed that I must be dreaming. I looked around and saw someone burying something. It was hard to see the man's face from the distance, so I walked a bit closer. I fell back when I saw it was the old man from earlier. He was burying a boy's body. He looked like a teenager to me. Old man's hand was dirtier with the mud and blood of the boy. He turned around looking straight past me, scanning the area, trying to see if anyone's coming or not. I guessed he couldn't see me. After he was finished burying, he went ahead, washed his hands, and sat in the chair in the cabin. I was suddenly in a different scenario. It was evening time. The old man was watching from his cabin. I looked towards the direction, and there were two boys who were sitting in front of a grave where their parents were buried. The old man got up and walked towards them. He started asking them sympathetically about their family and why they were alone there. The boys told him that their only remaining family was each other, and they don't have anyone else. He looked at him with weird eyes, and then his expression quickly changed again to the sympathetic one. He took the boys to the cabin and started talking to them. Between the conversation, old man tooled out some sweets to eat and gave it to them. They suddenly passed out as they were eating. After that, the old man took out their clothes one by one and started raping them. After raping, he took out a large plastic and placed them over that, and then he first cut their bodies in two halves and then buried only the upper parts of both in one grave. Then he came back to the cabin and raped the lower halves of their bodies several times over the night. As the sun was about to come out within hours, he buried the rest of the bodies as well. Scenario changed again, and suddenly there was another young teen boy who he had called in. Old man offered the boy sweets, but he refused, saying he doesn't feel like eating anything. The man started to force him to eat, so he stood up to leave. But as he walks outside, the old man hit him in the head and he passed out. Old man was dragging him inside the cabin, but the boy woke up and struggled to get free. The man looked annoyed by that and jumped over to rape him, but the boy kicked him with all his might. He fell backward, his head hit one of the tombstones and started to bleed. The boy ran outside the cemetery without even looking back. The old man kept staring at his back while taking his last breath. I woke up from a sharp pain in my back, which felt like getting scratched from something. I noticed I was being dragged, so I tried to look around, but there was no one around me. Then I noticed the old man standing at a distance, glaring at me with a monstrous look on his face. I was being dragged towards him. I started to scream for help. I tried to grab whatever came in my way to stop it, but it did not. I was screaming from the top of my lungs so that someone can hear me, but no one could. And I was sure at the time that I am going to die here. At the same time, I felt an invisible force pulling me from the opposite direction, so I looked at the old man's face, but it wasn't him. His face looked annoyed. I looked above my head, but nobody was there. But then suddenly, a figure of the boy who I'm seeing in the dream appeared, and he pulled me toward himself. Once again, I looked toward Old Man, but there were multiples of teenagers surrounding him, and then they all vanished. I got up immediately and ran outside, terrified from the cemetery. After that, I went straight home and locked myself in my room. My mom was worried from my sudden behavior in return, so she started to knock on the door and ask me questions. I didn't come out my room for 3 days, and when I came out, I told my mom about everything. She looked worried about me, but I knew she didn't believe me. She thought I may have gotten scared from a nightmare, but only I know that it wasn't the case.
Right after I dropped out of high school and moved out of my parents' house, I needed work real bad. I'd have done pretty much anything for rent money about that time in my life, so I'm lucky, or unlucky depending on how you look at it, that the local cemetery needed employees. At first, the old-timers who had been working there for 20 or 30 years just wondered why someone so young would ever want to be a gravedigger. It was hard work. Really bad on the lower back, but I soon adjusted, and it turned out to be something more akin to a free gym membership than an actual job. I mean it. I got swole pretty fast, and if I'm honest, it only ever felt like work if the weather was bad or we had an actual funeral on site. Otherwise, it was just nice to be able to spend time outdoors. So the way our cemetery was set up was pretty simple. The majority of the grounds were just regular grave sites, all pretty much the same size and same price. But the northwest corner of the grounds was a private site that contained much larger plots. These were reserved for much wealthier families, and the local undertaker made a lot of cash from selling extravagant grave setups to them. I'm talking whole mausoleums, statues of angels, and stuff like that. We hardly ever visited that area of the site except for cleaning and maintenance duties, and those were never left to me. I didn't take it personally, but the older guys just didn't trust me with all the cleaning chemicals and whatnot that kept the marble and brass fixtures looking fresh, which is why it was so weird when I got a call one of my days off, asking me if I'd been up to that area recently. My boss was livid. I could hear it in his voice, and he pulled no punches when he asked me if I'd been screwing around on the northwest plots. Of course, I told him no, that the last time I'd been up there was to watch one of the old-timers using the marble cleaning chemical as part of my training, and that had been months back. He sighed, seemed confused and confounded, so I asked him what exactly the issue was. He replied that it could wait until the next time I was at work. I was worried, sure, but I was pretty sure that I hadn't done anything wrong, not deliberately anyway, and especially nothing that involved the northwest plots. A couple of days later, when I rolled into work, the atmosphere was incredibly tense. I knew something fairly serious had happened. All I knew is that I wouldn't have to badger anyone to find out why. The boss man walked me out to the northwest plot, silent the whole way, and I knew better than to open my mouth until I found out exactly what was going on. There was already a worker up in the plot, tending to one of the graves, and that's when my boss told me that if I'd been hanging around the area, maybe during my lunch break, eating a few snacks among the opulent grave sites, now would be the time to tell him. I swore to God that I hadn't, that I knew better than to eat stuff near the graves, as I'd been well informed it attracts wild animals that can in turn do damage to some of the resting places. And that's when he broke it down for me. Something had tried to dig up one of the freshly dug graves out in the northwest plots. He said something in particular, not someone, because we each had enough experience to recognize when a grave had been dug up by tools or by hand, or, in this case, by claw. It was rough around the edges, obvious claw marks in the dirt as opposed to the straight lines carved out by a shovel. This was something in an emergency, I mean, for obvious sanitary reasons, but for sentimental reasons too. If local families discovered that wild animals were trying to dig up their deceased relatives, there would be an uproar. Something had to be done, and quickly. A meeting was called among the gravediggers in attendance. As far as we knew, the mysterious digging had been taking place overnight and was most likely undertaken by some kind of scavenger animal, a coyote, black bear, maybe even an escaped dog. The solution was obvious. Night watchmen would have to be present in the cemetery every night until the situation was resolved. And guess who was voluntold to be the night watchman for the first full week? You guessed it. The young guy. The new guy. Me. The only thing that made the proposal even vaguely attractive was the fact that anyone doing the night work would be paid double the regular rate, and I could definitely have done with the extra cash. First night of being on watch really sucked. All I had for company was a flask of strong coffee and a .22 pellet gun loaned to me by one of the other workers to take down any varmints. It was long, boring, and lonely, but once I adjusted my sleeping pattern, it got a little easier. Then, on the second to last night of my watchman duties, I was on a little foot patrol walking towards the northwest plot with a flashlight in my hand. And that's when I saw it. A flurry of frantic limbs digging at the earth. I could have shouted something, maybe even fired the .22 in the air to scare the animal away, but if I killed whatever critter was causing us so much trouble, I might be out of the extra pay, but at least I'd have my daytime life back. I crept up slowly, turning the flashlight off and sneaking stealthily towards the dark shape working away at the earth. I've hunted rabbits at night with my uncle before, so I figured I'd use the old flashlight technique to cause the animal to freeze for a second so I could take the killing shot. But when I did, when I aimed that powerful flashlight in the direction of the digging thing, I almost cried out in fear. It wasn't an animal at all. It was a human, crouched on all fours, digging away at the earth with his or her bare hands. I couldn't bring myself to aim the rifle. I was too shocked at what I was looking at. So all I did was start making as much noise as possible, telling them to get out of there, saying I'd call the cops if they didn't comply. They complied all right, but not out of fear. The look in that person's eyes was one of fury, pure anger that they'd been interrupted in their obscene little act. I swear if I hadn't had that rifle with me, if I hadn't the means to defend myself that were obvious to them, I honestly don't know if I'd be here today to tell this story. Needless to say, the other workers didn't believe me in what I saw. Some of them told me they didn't doubt that I'd seen something, that they disputed what that thing was, and I get that, I really do, but still, I don't know what I saw. The police struggled to determine anything other than maybe a few boot footprints, but it really didn't lead to anything else, as that individual ran far, far into the tree line beyond what I was capable of seeing. All I know is that it was definitely a person.